Hi, friends. We're reading Walter Brown and the Magician's Hat, and we are on chapter 6. Chapter 6 is on page 46, And the name of chapter 6 is The Duel. So the duel means a fight between two people. That is a duel. Okay, so we're going to have a duel, a fight between two people. So I think they're the two people that were inside Walter's hat. So that was the the Crystal Warrior King, and the Flaming Fire Fiend. So it's the ice and the fire are going to fight inside Walter's hat. The duel. "What's happened to you?" said Hannah, as Walter, still dripping water, burst through the kitchen back door. 6 Cents whisked in at his ankles, her tail set unusually low. "Oh, just some kids messing about with the hose down the road," said Walter, trying to catch his breath. Hannah frowned and tried to sound important. "Mom and Dad have gone to set up the party for later. You'd better go and get cleaned up before they get back." Without waiting for his answer, she picked up her pen and carried on with her Viking project, which was spread out over the kitchen table. So Hannah is doing her homework. Okay, said Walter wearily. "It's my birthday, you know, Han. You don't need to be quite so grumpy." Walter loved his big sister, but since she turned 13, she became a bit too serious, not to mention hard to predict. Whenever she was left in charge, she chopped and changed, being between acting like a grown-up and being really boring, and going back to her old self and being a good fun, depending on what was going on. So because she's 13, sometimes she's an adult and sometimes she's a child. She goes back and forth. "By the way," she said, suddenly forgetting to sound important, "I'm still only halfway through my homework, so I guess your first spell didn't work, eh? Ha ha." But Walter couldn't reply. Instead, he snapped his eyes shut and started shaking his head hard from side to side. Something inside his hat wasn't quite right. "Quick," shouted 6 Cents, bolting towards the hallway door, her fur bristling. "You need to get out of here." Walter ignored 6 Cents. He was getting more and more agitated as to what felt like frozen pinpricks starting to dance around on top of his head. "Ow!" he screeched, staring at Hannah and pulling the top hat tightly at the brim. Now something that felt like a red-hot poker was jumping about on top of his head in between the frozen picks. So he has hot and cold poking him on his head. Ouch. "What's the matter?" said Hannah, as Walter began to shake his head again. "Have you got water in your ears?" But Walter didn't answer. Instead, his eyes froze open in panic as he realized what was happening. The lead warriors in the Planet Boss game must have come back to life to fight the dance of death. He'd seen it in the advertisements. It was a last chance for the loser to earn extra points and honor after the main battle. That meant they were dueling, fighting on top of his head. Well, and you can see on the picture here that it looks like Walter's head hurts a lot because they are fighting on top of his head. Walter took an inward gasp and made a dash for the hallway door. "Ow! Ah! I must get these wet clothes off. Yow! That's sore!" He raced up the stairs, closely followed by 6 Cents, and slammed his bedroom door. Back in the kitchen, Hannah shook her head and rolled her eyes. "Boys," she said with a sigh. and then carried on with her note-taking. Back to her homework. Once safely inside his bedroom, Walter ripped the top hat from his head and threw it towards his desk. As it twirled across the room, just before it knocked over his lamp and fell to the floor out of sight, two tiny figures went flying through the air. The first, a tiny gesticulating ball of fire made up of a flaming head and flaming arms and legs, bounced across the floor and disappeared under his bed. So the fire fiend went under the bed. The second, a shimmering shape of ice and none other than the Crystal Warrior King himself, landed in the middle of the carpet. Walter stalled and gazed open-mouthed at the ice figure. Sixth Sense leapt onto the bed and stared down, her green eyes glinting. So there's two warriors, two fighters, the Ice King, the Warrior King, and the Fire Fiend. The Crystal Warrior King stood about 10 centimeters tall, so not very big, right? His arms, legs, and body were made up of what looked like tightly packed icicles. And icicles are these things here on the screen behind me. These are icicles. Large frost particles coated his bushy eyebrows and mustache. Frost is like snow up here. Coated his bushy eyebrows and mustache, and his beard looked like a tiny frozen waterfall. On top of his head, the Crystal Warrior King wore what looked like a glass crown, but which was, of course, made of ice. As he frantically turned his head from left to right and back again, trying to see where the flaming fire fiend had disappeared to, his flowing, frost-covered hair sparkled like millions of tiny diamonds. So this right here is a picture of the Crystal Warrior King, the Crystal Warrior King. And the Crystal Warrior King is made from ice, like this ice, made from ice. Sixth Sense cocked her head to one side and pricked her fluffy ears forward. Nice crown, she joked, unheard by Walter. Right, Walter can't hear her because he doesn't have his hat on right now. He threw the hat. Less of the chat, cat, snapped the Crystal Warrior King. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? So he wants to know where the fire fiend went. The Crystal Warrior King carried on, twisting his head from left to right, looking around. Come so I can freeze your flames, he screeched in a high pitch. You'll have to come and get me, sparkled face, came an echoing cackle from under Walter's bed. Show yourself, flame-faced coward, roared the Crystal Warrior King insofar as he could with his high-pitched, frosty voice. So his voice is very high, I think, because he's very small. I don't know. He waved his glittering dagger icicle arms in the direction of Walter's bed and started lunging back and forth. Walter, who couldn't hear any of this without his hat, chuckled as he watched the Ice King trying to coax out his enemy. Go on, go after it, he shouted eagerly, unaware that the fire fiend's glow underneath his bed was rapidly growing in size. The fire under the bed is rapidly growing in size. Sixth Sense, whose bottom was beginning to feel more than a little warm, began leaping around, trying to get Walter's attention. The bed, she shouted. It'll all go up in flames. Get the hat on, Walter. We've got to get the fire fiend out. The flaming fire fiend was now breathing stronger and stronger flame jets, so the fire came out of his mouth, which eventually slithered into sight like orange serpent tongues as it tried to reach the white Crystal Warrior King. So fire was coming out from under the bed towards the Crystal Warrior King. You can see the picture here on the next page. All right, here we have the Crystal Warrior King, and underneath the bed is the Fire Fiend, and he's shooting out fire from his mouth. On seeing the flames, the fire, Walter shrieked, "Ah!" and grabbed a towel from the radiator, then dived onto the carpet to try to smother them, but missed. Instead, he found himself eyeball to eyeball with the flaming Fire Fiend as it hovered just out of reach. He couldn't reach the flaming Fire Fiend. In the same moment, Sixth Sense, who could no longer stand the heat, leapt off the bed. The bed was getting hot. This had an unexpected effect. The flaming Fire Fiend, faced with the glinting eyes of a giant fluffy monster alongside Walter's, took a sharp inward gasp and drew in its flames. It stopped the fire. "What is that?" it breathed in a tiny roar, fear flickering in its eyes for the first time in its battle-hardened gaming life. It then propelled itself into a fireball along the floorboards towards the head of the bed and sizzled along the bottom of the wall to the other side of the room. So he rolled away to get away from Sixth Sense. Walter jumped up to find the Fire Fiend hovering by the radiator under his window, dangerously close to the curtains. Butterflies flew in frenzied circles in his tummy. He was nervous again. He flicked a glance towards his desk, but his hat was out of reach on the floor. Should he try to extinguish the flaming Fire Fiend without Sixth Sense help, or leave it to the Ice King? He gripped his wand with his right hand, but hesitated. He couldn't risk experimenting with magic and fire, not after the mess he'd made of the first spell. Sixth Sense arched her back and hissed menacingly in the Fire Fiend's direction, and it dimmed its flames again. Seizing his chance, Walter dashed across the room and scooped up his hat from under the desk. Leave it, he's mine," he heard the Crystal Warrior King screeching as he pulled his hat on. Stay back, Sixth Sense cried in reply, knowing that the combined heat of the radiator and the Fire Fiend would be the little king's undoing. But it was too late. The White Crystal Warrior King let out a chilling scream and charged to a certain meltdown. The Fire Fiend's flames doubled in size as they engulfed the tiny Ice King and were now licking towards the edge of the curtains. Stop! Walter bellowed, his whole body shaking. At last, called Sixth Sense, seeing the hat on his head. As she turned and looked into his eyes, Walter's wand was already raised high in the air. So there's no more Tiny Ice King. There's no more White Crystal Warrior King. He got swallowed by the flames. But now Walter needs to stop the Fire Fiend before his house catches on fire, right? Because he's near the curtains, and that's very dangerous for the fire, the curtains and the radiator. So that is chapter 6. I'll see you for chapter 7.